property ladder has kept GTA real estate humming and maybe the real estate industry in general for the past couple decades. The idea is that as a first-time home buyer, you buy a condo. Then after a few years, you graduate up to a townhome after building some equity. You turn that townhome into a semi-detached property, and then eventually you arrive at your fully detached dream home. But is that still a realistic reality in today's market? I'm going to dive into that in today's video. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. It's me, Rob Marsiglio, sales representative with Keller Williams Referred Urban Realty, with a new setup today. Look at that fancy background I got going on. If you got questions about anything I covered in today's video, I do have a Calendly link in the description of the video. You can book a call directly in my calendar with me. And if you enjoyed these deep dives into the stats and numbers, looking at trends in GTA real estate, this might be the channel for you. Consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. The more people I can reach just like you, the more it helps me, and the more it hopefully helps them as well. In today's video, I want to take a look at a couple different examples of property ladders in the greater Toronto area, just seeing how those have changed over the years. Is the property ladder still a feasible idea? And going forward, what are some of the pressures on the upper end of that property ladder, as well as the lower end of that property ladder? Will we see the rungs of the ladder come together or spread further and further apart? Here's the first example of a property ladder that I want to show you. This is kind of the city dwellers property ladder. It starts with somebody who buys, this blue line being a CO1 condo. So CO1 is the majority of downtown condos fall in this district of the city. Then they would kind of graduate up into that townhome in the East End, let's call it. So EO1, that covers your Riverdale, kind of that area of the city. And then maybe they want to jump into that single family attached home. So the semis or the detached homes eventually, maybe that's where they intend on settling down in that Leslieville, Riverdale area. So you can see back in January of 2010, right under my head here, the spread between a kind of the benchmark price for the least expensive property, which would be in townhomes at the time, and the fully detached home proper in EO1 was about $250,000. You can see that the gap really widened. It was pretty flat, the market for condos and townhomes, all the way up to 2017, let's call it. Whereas detached and attached properties saw a bit more of a market increase. You know, we saw that gap really jump by 2017. This most recent peak in the market that we saw in 2022, we saw the gap expand all the way between the kind of least expensive benchmark price, being those condos in the downtown core. That was $862,000. And a detached property was $1,750,000 in March of 2022. So you're talking about a $900,000 difference between those two property types. That gap has since shrunk down as of October 2024 to around $800,000. So kind of trending in the right direction, maybe those rungs coming a little bit closer together. Here's a second example of a property ladder. This is going to be something more suburban. I use Pickering as an example, kind of maybe appealing to people in the city. It's closest to the city when it comes to Durham region, and probably the most affordable city that abuts Toronto directly. You can see, again, going back to January 2010, the spread between a Pickering townhome, the green line, and a Pickering fully detached home was in and around, it was less than $200,000, but $180,000 between those two. That spread between apartments in March 2022 and that fully detached home ballooned all the way to about $800,000, and has since come in a little bit to $600,000. So we were seeing, again, that gap shrink. The gap between townhomes and apartments, making that jump maybe something easy to stomach, a little bit tougher to stomach the jump up to the semi-detached property. And then again, still a good $300,000 gap between the benchmark price for a detached home and a semi-detached home. And one more property that I want to share with you is, the people who start their journey in the city in those downtown apartments, then maybe they want to graduate up into a townhome in the East End, and then their forever home, that single family detached out in the suburbs, again, using Pickering as the example here. Really at a point in time in early 2020, you were flipping a coin. If you're choosing to upsize, then you were looking at about, call it a $200,000 gap, just shy of that, between the CO1 apartment and a townhome in the East End or a fully detached property in Pickering. Pandemic, people's changing how they wanted to live their lives. We really did see a big influx in, I guess, the values, at least the prices of homes in Pickering. So that spread ballooned all the way up to, about $700,000 between the CO1 apartment and the detached home at the peak. That spread has since come back in to closer to, we'll call it $500,000, just shy of $500,000. But that rung between apartments and townhomes is starting to widen a bit. So, if you're starting in that CO1 condo right now, the jump to the townhome is a little more than it was, a couple years ago. But that gap between detached properties and East End townhomes is, starting to shrink a little bit as well. So the idea of the property ladder may not be as seamless as it used to be. You could see that spreads between property values. The detached and semi-detached segment really experienced more appreciation than we saw in townhomes and condos right across the city, right across the GTA. Let's look at how those things have been trending really since the most recent peak that we saw in March 2022 to see if those gaps are actually shrinking or will continue to maybe shrink, or if they are starting to expand a little bit more. And for this exercise, what I've simply done is, we'll go in the same order. This is the kind of that city dweller on the property ladder. You're starting in a condo right now. You can see that the condo apartment trend line for the peak benchmark price in 2023, the peak benchmark price in 2024 is definitely on a downtrend, whereas townhomes, we kind of heard all about how semis and townhomes experienced a little bit more activity this past year. And then maybe that's where we saw the majority of price increases in the GTA. That is starting to trend upwards, maybe just a little bit over the couple of years. Again, 2 data points do not make a trend, but let's just using these two, if this trend does continue, we'll see that gap start to widen between the bottom rung of condos and that townhome gap. I think the promising thing is that if you are in a townhome right now, and let's say you even bought in 2023, you saw maybe a bit of appreciation from peak to peak. The market that you're chasing, that semi-detached market and detached market, at least in EO1 as an example, we're starting to see those trend downwards, at least over the last couple of years. So does this trend continue? We'll try to answer that question a little bit later in the video. Here's back to our Durham region example using Pickering, and you can see that really all property types are trending downwards. Based on this, apartments or condos are trending downwards a little bit quicker than townhomes, but I'd say they're kind of trending downwards at a similar rate. What's maybe promising is that it looks like detached homes, maybe we'll start to see that gap shrink, but how far do you have to go off of this chart to see those gaps close to a level that people are really comfortable with? Like each major unit here is $200,000, so you're looking at about a $300,000 gap between your attached homes, your semis, and your detached homes right now. A pretty big jump to swallow for somebody trying to climb the property ladder, especially in the current rate environment. And to wrap up, we'll look at that CO1 moving kind of slightly outside of the city center to the townhome and then out into the suburbs to your final resting place, to put it kind of morbidly, but to that detached home in the suburbs, that family dream home. Again, if you're in that townhome and you're looking and eyeing an upsize in the next couple of years, these trend lines are promising. Again, not to guarantee that they're going to continue on this trend line, but while the bottom rung is falling off compared to that townhome rung, your gap between detached homes in the suburbs in Pickering and between townhomes in the city is starting to shrink. Again, maybe giving you some hope if you're trying to climb up that last rung of the property ladder. Bonus content here. Let's say that you've made the jump to Pickering and you want to come back into the city. There is a pathway here. We're starting to see the gap between, we saw the gap really close between Pickering detached homes and EO1 semi-detached homes, especially at the peak of the market. But the gap is still much shorter than it was really in the time frame between 2017 all the way through to when we saw the market really take off in Pickering and in the suburbs. So that gap has stayed relatively closed and might represent a bit more of a comfortable jump up from one market segment to the next. So before we go any further, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know, what do you think of the property ladder? Is it pie in the sky right now? Do you see the property ladder becoming something that's more or less attainable as time goes on? To wrap up, I just want to highlight a few different talking points. I just go through some headlines to show you how I think the bottom of that property ladder, being the condo market, and the top will be affected. Again, just by what we've seen in the news recently, by construction starts and the like. So let's start with the bottom of the market being condos, and condo inventory growing as sellers anticipate demand rebound. That's from a Remax report. So condo inventory is on the rise in most major Canadian markets as more sellers are listing their properties in anticipation of growing demand from buyers, a new report says. So without getting into the specifics of the result, pretty simply put, if you're seeing a lot more supply come to market all at one time, I do think that the supply and demand principles, can really answer what is going to happen with prices in that scenario. If buyers do have more selection, sellers are going to have to be a little bit more accepting of lower offers. It's probably some downward price pressure on that condo market. Again, not something you necessarily want to see as somebody buying into an asset class. You'd probably want to see condos really bottom out prior to attempting this climbing the ladder strategy. If you bought in the near term and there's a flood of inventory and prices continue to drop, you are really you're going to observe that separation, that gap between condos and townhomes. Something else that I feel like will affect the bottom end of the market is that record rental construction drives housing starts in Canada's largest city. It's according to CMHC. That's an article from Ontario Construction News on October 1st, 2024. And simply put here, I think this puts downward pressure on the bottom end of the market because if there's more rental supply available, rents are already more attractive than mortgages in almost 100% of the cases in the Greater Toronto area right now if you're comparing similar property types. So if rents are that much more attractive by more rental inventory coming to market, I think that draws some demand out of the condo space. Maybe the next generation isn't so gung-ho on home ownership like millennials were, like Gen X was, like the boomers were, and the people, maybe millennials not so much, but that really benefited from these massive price increases over the last few years. So if there's a kind of shift in what is important to Gen Z, rental prices being lower allows them to live in a more vibrant area, put some more downward pressure on the bottom of that property ladder. And some more bad news for the bottom of that property ladder, as my colleague Cam Cassidy shared out here. Somebody paid $923,000 for this 555 square foot condo, putting down $186,000, and now they're trying to assign it for $647,000. So they're trying to assign it for almost $300,000 less than what they initially paid for this unit. This is out in Mississauga City Center. But again, that new condo, that pre-condo, that new construction, people struggling to close because of valuations is again going to add to that supply glut that we're seeing in the condo space. And again, more supply with equal or maybe falling demand means prices on that bottom rung are going to go down. So that talks about the bottom rung. What about the top rung, being that detached, semi-detached property type, the kind of end goal for most people trying to climb that property ladder? Here's a headline from Global News from November 14th. Single family home starts hit 69-year lows in new Ontario housing data. And this here is from Statista.com, and it kind of shows you going back to 2006 all the way through 2023, the number of single detached housing starts in Ontario. We went from, creeping up to almost 40,000 housing starts in 2006. And that number dropped down to somewhere around 18,000 in 2023. And again, if we were to continue this chart down, we would dip even further, maybe even off this chart in 2024. So less housing supply being built at that top end. Again, you still do have affordability constraints, don't get me wrong. Mortgages are much more expensive now than they were over the past decade, let's call it. So you do have that constraint on affordability, but you also don't have a ton of supply, resale supply coming to market to alleviate a lot of that, those constraints in supply. So again, low supply, if there is still high demand to buy that detached family home in the suburbs, more competition for that means potentially upward price pressure on the top of the market. Bottom line, I think it's debatable right now whether or not the property ladder is a great strategy. I think that maybe renting something a little cheaper, investing your money in a different vehicle that you are familiar with, that you are comfortable with, that is going to guarantee you some returns, because there are no guarantees in returns in real estate ever, but really especially right now, in my opinion. So property ladder, probably not the best strategy, but if getting into a detached home is something you can do right now, maybe not a bad idea. Again, let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, yes, prices may go down further, but is getting into a home that you want to be in for long term right now a better idea than trying to get into something that you're not going to be as happy with with the hopes of graduating up that property ladder. A little bit of a different video this week, a little bit of a different background. Let me know what you think in the comments below, please. I appreciate you as always for tuning in. If you enjoyed this style of video, let me know in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share with a friend who is interested in learning more about the property ladder in the GTA. And until we speak again next time, please stay safe and cheers.